You are listening to Committed, an ongoing conversation about marriage, intimacy, relationships, and sex. I'm a marriage and relationship coach dedicated to helping couples and individuals like you build stronger, more fulfilling relationships. I have a deep understanding of communication dynamics, conflict resolution, and intimacy. I guide clients through challenges with compassion and expertise. Hi, I hope you're all great. I was just texting with a friend about how motherhood is just truly a challenge sometimes. And so I was giggling right before I hit record. Other things that are a challenge are my hair today. It's almost hair wash day, if you know what I mean. So I'm ready for that. My background, this whole situation right here is a challenge that I am trying to figure out. So if you have thoughts on how I could easily make it better, keep them to yourself because I'm working really hard. So today I want to talk to you about controlling partners. And I'm going to bring up my notes here because I want to specifically go through some symptoms of a controlling partner and what that could mean for your relationship, and then talk with you a little bit about how to work with this and combat this if you are dealing with a relationship where you've a controlling partner in most likely, if you're dealing with this, more than one way. It's not necessarily just going to be over one domain, it's going to be over multiple. So let's get into it. The very first thing is, how do we define a controlling partner? And so I'm going to go through some different criteria that might help you define whether your partner is controlling. One thing that I want to mention here before I begin defining these criteria is that I want you to learn to listen to your instincts. And this is something that I had to learn later in life. When we're younger and we are being taken care of because we're helpless children, right? We depend on others in order to get our needs met. Sometimes we are misguided. And I want to say also, in the best of families, we can be misguided. I'm feeling this, but my parent is dealing with something on their end. And so in their viewpoint, in their vantage point, my minuscule problem really doesn't mean that much to them, and it's not big fish, right? If you've ever heard the phrase, we have bigger fish to fry, the issues that our parents may be dealing with in life, to them are bigger fish to fry than our smaller issues. And so for some of us, we have had parents that are attuned to us and they listen to us and they make our problems that might seem small to them, they make them big because they feel big to us. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that just because I can't have my ice cream tonight, that my parent in that moment actually says, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. Like, you're exactly right. This is absolutely horrible that you can't have ice cream. But at the same time, they're not saying, it doesn't matter, it's just ice cream. Let it go, forget about it, stop being such a baby, stop whining, stop crying. A healthy parent-child relationship in that moment is going to be somewhere in between. So they're going to say, oh my gosh, you really wanted that ice cream. And if any of you have watched Dr. Becky, she's a child psychologist and she talks a lot about this. How do we interact with and how do we respond to our children when they're struggling with something, right? We're gaslighting them if we are telling them that they have no reason to feel the way that they're feeling. And I can guarantee you, most of you watching, if you are parents, you have done this to your child before, or you have been a victim of this in your childhood. But it doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. You don't have to do it perfectly all of the time. However, you have to do it some of the time where you validate what your child is feeling, what they're thinking, and what they're saying. And so the reason why I say this now that you're adults and you're in your romantic relationships is that I want you to trust your instincts. I want you to trust yourself. When something doesn't feel right to you, it may not be right. You may be correct. You very well may be correct. I want you to believe yourself. When something's coming up and it just doesn't feel like the right situation, it might not be right. All right. So that's very important here, because when we have a controlling partner, we will sometimes self-gaslight or self-manipulate. Well, they're only doing that because they care about me, or they're doing that because they just want what's best for me. We may be manipulating ourselves out of the reality in those situations. And sometimes after we've broken up or after we've divorced somebody or at least separated, or look back in retrospect, even if we're with the same person, we might realize, you know what? I wasn't treating myself with respect in that moment. So that is first and foremost the most important thing to do. And what I want you to do is I want you to reach out to me if you have been experiencing some of these dynamics. And what I can do is I can address it on the podcast, or I can work with you personally to start to learn that self-trust again, or maybe for the first time. So ask yourself, have I experienced this in the past? Where does it come from? Why am I questioning myself right now? What is the origin of this? And then how do I begin to start to trust myself so that I can have a healthier relationship with myself first, and then healthier relationships with others? The thing is, people that discount their own experiences have a deep fear that maybe nobody's going to be there for me, no one's going to come for me, my partner's going to physically or emotionally abandon me. A fear that I personally have is that my partner will stay present physically, but emotionally they'll detach from me and they'll invalidate me. And then I'll just have to live a life with someone who truly doesn't get me or understand me, and therefore can't have an authentic relationship with me. So I know that's really deep. I've also done years and years of work in order to get to the point where I can understand that. But that's something that I have to communicate in my partnership and make sure that my husband knows, so that he can understand why he might have to work a little harder to validate me in moments than someone who may not have had some of the experiences that I've had. So now, number one on my list, secluding you from friends and family. When partners are insecure in themselves and maybe are concerned physically that you are going to abandon them, right? So that you are not going to want to be in the relationship anymore. They may start to seclude you from other people in your life. It could be an effort to make sure that you don't have outside influences, because the reality is that if it's all up to your partner, what's happening, when it's happening, how it's happening, then it's easier for them to keep you in their bubble. But when you start to talk to friends and family, especially if you are in a toxic relationship dynamic, friends and family are going to raise their eyebrows. They're going to say, this is kind of weird. This is a strange relationship. Why are things happening this way? Does this person actually have your best interest in mind? That's important to ask yourself to consider if this is something that's happening. If you didn't notice that your partner was doing this, but you notice that 5 months, 8 months into your relationship, 2 years into your relationship, you don't really talk to the people that you spoke with before. Well, is it because you made that choice, or is it because your partner made that choice? And I think sometimes when people are in these dynamics, they may believe that, oh, well, I decided to, right? That person wasn't a good influence on me. But when you really look into it a little bit more, you might start to realize that it was more of your partner. It could have been comments here or there that they've made. Understand that that comes from insecurity. I'm not going to recommend in every single one of these scenarios that you break up with your partner, that you get rid of the relationship, because I do believe that there are ways to work on these things. And I'll go through some of that when I go through the different scenarios. All right. The second one is telling you how to dress. That's something that your partner just should not be doing. Really, no one should be telling you how to dress. There's a lot of controversy out in society about what needs to happen. And sometimes I even feel it myself, because with my own daughters, I say, we're not showing our bellies. And crop tops are something that kids and adults wear. I even find myself wearing a crop top every once in a while in the right circumstance where I feel comfortable. But when we're talking about children, there's a different, I guess, connotation around it. And I always try to be really thoughtful and mindful when I'm providing this feedback, commentary, advice, asks of my own children. But if you're an adult in a relationship, you get to decide how you dress. Your partner does not, right? People looking at you in a way, maybe in a sexual way, that's not you cheating. And the reason I say that is because I think some people think, well, if I dress in a suggestive way, that it invites other people to make commentary, maybe flirt with me, maybe try to get me to cheat on my partner, try to get me to go out with them, talk to me in a certain way that's flirty. But those aren't your actions. Those are other people's actions that they're imposing on you, and you get to decide how to respond. And so in terms of the way that you dress, it's not something that your partner should be monitoring. Okay? Checking your phone. Phones have become very private, where a handful of years ago, I don't think that they were as private as they are today. And I do agree that they're private. Now, in relationship, I don't believe that you should be hiding anything from your partner on your phone. Do I think that your partner should have 24/7 access to your phone or your devices? They shouldn't, because you're not going to be with them physically all the time. But if your partner ever had a question about something or was concerned that you might be cheating on them, that you might be engaging in inappropriate behaviors, and they were to ask you, I do personally, and again, this is my personal belief, and this is the way that I work with my clients, that you should be forthcoming about whatever's happening. Where it gets hairy is that people can delete things and hide things in certain ways. But I do think that there's most of the time other signs and symptoms that are coming up in that relationship that are going to make someone, at least from the outside, say, that's a little strange, or that's weird, or that doesn't feel right. So that's what I'm going to put out there about cell phones. Your partner shouldn't be checking your cell phone all the time. Ideally, your relationship should embody trust, and you should have faith that your partner is doing the right thing. Your belief about your partner should be that they are a good person. If you have any question about that, then there's a bigger foundational issue going on in the relationship that's not directly related to the phone, but the phone could be a symptom of that. So you shouldn't be doing routine checks on your partner's phone, and your partner shouldn't be doing routine checks on your phone unless there has been documented infidelity that has happened, or someone has come out and said verbally that they have committed infidelity, and now you have a plan and you're working maybe with a provider on that plan. And the deal is that you are checking your partner's phone every so often, or they're checking your phone every so often to provide some relaxation around that process. The hairy thing about this is that it often turns into something else when you start down that path. So, not going to talk more about infidelity here, but that's another conversation for another day. Next, insecurity is about doing your job or activities you like. When you get into a relationship with someone, especially if you are two adults coming together once you've established your lifestyle, it's not like you got together when you were 13 years old and you grew up together and were always involved in everything with one another. That obviously happens. You should have the ability to pursue the activities that you want to do and the career path that you want to do. Your partner shouldn't be hindering you or holding you back from doing that. A little bit of a vulnerable share. I was in a relationship when I first started my practice years ago now, and that partner did feel insecure about what I was doing. Looking back, the outcome of that should have been that we broke up because he wasn't comfortable with the job that I was doing at the time, or he should have worked on what he was uncomfortable with. Unfortunately, I started to pull back on my work and I started to see less clients, and I virtually did not grow my business at that time and had to take off at another point in time because my previous partner was controlling when I worked, the way that I worked, how I was working with people. And that essentially should not have happened because it's not his career. You can have boundaries around jobs that you're not willing to be in relationship with a person who does those jobs. So say you don't want to be in a relationship with, I'm just going to throw a random one that doesn't make any sense out there. You don't want to be in a relationship with an accountant because they work really long hours at a certain time of the year, and you want more access to your partner because it enhances you personally to have more access. Now, I would challenge you in that situation to ask yourself, how much time are you really missing from your partner? And is this a place to insert your own personal coping strategy so that you can persevere through this and care for yourself in some way while you are missing your partner? But what we know is that sometimes this insecurity and desire and need for more from a partner translates into attempting to control a partner instead of attempting to work on what is personal to you. There are some things that can't be worked on without asking your partner and negotiating with them to adjust in order to accommodate. But something like a job, if you work to negotiate, to accommodate, and to make sure that everybody's happy, well, that's a very different situation than your partner telling you that they're not comfortable with what you do or how you do it, and so that you need to change and that you're going to stay in the relationship. The thing is that they're manipulating you. You don't have to stay in the relationship. If you don't agree to the stipulations that they want to put out there, you don't have to remain in the partnership together with that person. So that's really important to note. And I totally understand how it can be kind of a sticky situation to deal with because it's not always cut and dry. Next, jealous or accusatory. So this happens in relationship as well, where people can be jealous of maybe a friend that you have. I'm jealous that you talk to your friend on the phone every Saturday for an hour. And so they slowly try to get you to conform to what their needs are, which the needs are based on their own insecurities. There's room for compassion, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But at the same time, it starts to take away from your freedoms as an individual. Maybe every time you talk to somebody of the opposite sex out in public, your partner gets mad at you for 3 hours because they believe that you are flirting with someone and you don't agree to do that in your relationship. In monogamous relationships, people mostly don't do that, right? Another example for you here. When I was in this relationship that I referenced before, I went to a grocery store with him because we would go every Sunday, and I was in the hummus section, and this other guy came up to me and he started chit-chatting with me. And I don't tend to be a very flirty person, so I was just straight up talking to him. He started asking me some questions, what are my kids' names? And that was a total boundary for me. So I was just like, all right, I need to extricate myself from this conversation. I was just like, I don't know you. I don't feel comfortable. So I start walking away. Also, however, my partner was standing across the store watching this all unfold. And I was trying my best to get away from the person that was trying to talk to me because I had no desire to even have a casual conversation, which I was entitled to do as a human because we interact with other people on a regular basis if we're regular people and we go out into the world. So my partner and I eventually get back together in the store. We're walking away. And what ensues there and then later in the car is a whole conversation about how I was inappropriately talking to someone else. The reality of the situation, my reality, was that this person spoke to me, but regardless, I can talk to people. Not a big deal. Also, my reality was that I didn't want to be in that conversation anymore. So what ended up happening is I was very much gaslit into thinking that I did something wrong. And for the rest of that relationship, and I even knew in the grocery store, I knew that something was going to start from this, that I needed to be on edge and I need to watch out what I'm doing. Versus, I'll give you a little example of my marriage. Nowadays, my husband dropped me off at the mall one evening, and because I wanted to go into a store and he was going to go to the grocery store across the road. So I said, let's divide and conquer because we don't have that much time left. And I just want to run in here and you can do the grocery shopping and I will go into the store. So he drops me off. I go into the store. I was having the time of my life. It was the evening. So it was like, there's nobody in there. And I'm just perusing the shelves. It was just, I felt like I had the store to myself. And around the corner comes this guy. And he starts talking to me, which I also thought was hilarious because I had no makeup on. I was completely casual. And I must have had my hands in my pockets or so he didn't see my wedding ring. And so he starts talking to me, and then he asks me what college I go to which I burst out laughing because I was like, I don't think that you realize that I'm a mom and I've been out of college for a long time now, but that's very cute of you to ask. And he then proceeded to ask for my number. And I told him, I'm so sorry, I'm married and I'm in a monogamous relationship. And he profusely apologized. And we were like, have a good night. See you later. See you never. So I leave the mall. I get in the car. I immediately tell my husband, because he's now gotten the groceries, pick me up. I immediately tell my husband about it. And he was like, congrats, good for you. You were hit on by somebody. Because sometimes being married in a monogamous relationship, it feels good to be hit on by somebody else and know that I'm an attractive person out in the world. This is really cool. Hugely different outcomes to pretty similar situations, although the second guy was not a creep, the first guy was. And anyways, when we're talking about controlling partners, they're going to do something like you talk to someone else and they're going to make a mountain out of a molehill. And we don't want that. So look out for that as a sign and symptom criteria. Financially controlling. If you have a bank account that your partner owns or your partner manages and you don't have the login and password to it, if your paycheck goes into it but you don't have access to it, if your partner manages all the bills and refuses to let you help manage the bills, if your partner is making financial decisions like what to buy as far as anything from extracurricular activities to vacations to groceries to medications to any other health care needs that you might have, to furniture around your house or the types of clothes that you wear, that's not okay for your partner to have the financial control over things without relinquishing it. There is a difference between enlisting this job to your partner that your partner wants to do and trusting them and really not caring that they're managing that aspect. I don't advise that in long-term relationships because I think it puts anyone who's not managing the finances also in a one-down position. And so I definitely recommend that both partners be engaged in the financial process of your life. But that could look like one partner managing it and you both sitting down and having a meeting on a bi-weekly basis about where you're at with the finances, what needs to be paid, how much you're putting in savings, how much money you're investing, etc. So if they're financially controlling you, you don't want to be in that situation. I want you to notice if this resonates with you, that maybe some of this is happening, and start to take some accountability for yourself and control over it. Next, your partner doesn't listen to your emotions, manipulates you not to feel a certain way. Let's take the secluding you from family and friends, for example. And you're starting to feel lonely. You're starting to feel like you don't have a social life and that you're secluded from other people and you're confused. And what's so sticky about these situations is that when people are in controlling relationships, they often don't realize that it's what's happening, or they realize it and they're too scared. So when it comes down to the emotional piece, your partner could be saying, well, we need to spend more time together if you're feeling lonely. If you would just schedule more date nights for us, or if we just had sex more, you might not feel as lonely. I'm completely creating that as a scenario, and I'd love to hear from my listeners if there's something else that you're coming up with that might make you feel emotionally controlled. But if your partner is really disengaging from what's going on from you, they might be dealing with something themselves and they don't mean to manipulate you or really gaslight you into thinking what you're feeling isn't what's truly happening for you. But if this is happening on a regular basis, it's a problem. So If you're experiencing emotions that your partner is not caring for, not listening to, not understanding, and this is happening over and over and over, you're in trouble, because part of being in relationship with someone else is having them get you and having them understand you and having them be a team player and also a cheerleader for you. If I came to my husband today and I was just like, I'm feeling super lonely, I feel like I'm disconnected, I feel like I don't hang out with anybody I want to anymore, my partner would sit down with me or stand up with me wherever we are and talk about how we can get me out of this rut. What do you need to do? All right, what's the next weekend that you're free? Maybe take every single weekend and one night on the weekend go see a friend. A controlling partner is not going to say that, and they're not going to do that because that poses a threat to them that you're going to leave. And a lot of this comes down to that. If I have control over everything, I can keep you in the space that makes me feel comfortable so that I don't have to deal with my uncomfortability of being alone, of feeling like I don't have any support, of feeling like I don't have a person. It's almost like you are your partner's sidekick and your partner has a leash attached to you and like a harness, and they're dragging you along behind them so they can have something to focus and pay attention to that really takes away from having to confront what's coming up for them. Major life decisions. So making major life decisions. This also can connect to the financial one. Deciding where you're going to live, deciding what kind of house you're going to live in, deciding how many kids you're going to have, deciding when to have those kids. Making decisions independently that don't involve you in them. It's different if you're given the opportunity to weigh in and you choose not to. You don't get to then go back on your partner and say, well, I never wanted this. That's just not taking responsibility for yourself. That's a different ballgame. But if your partner never involves you in a decision, or you try to involve yourself and they don't take that into consideration and just move forward with whatever they want, your partner may be controlling some of your life decisions. And that's not a good place to be in as well, because then you can end up with responsibilities that you now can't back yourself out of because you're in them, such as having children if you didn't want to, living in a certain place. Say they're like, I really want to move to Wyoming and I've just always dreamed of living there. And you're like, I'm not so sure about that. Well, don't pick up and move if you're not so sure about it, right? Stay put where you are until you can make a sound decision. It's okay to come to a conclusion that I'm never going to be sure and I'm going to decide that I'm going to make this move with you because I love you and I want to be with you and I want to make our relationship work. But that's up to me to decide if I want to go against some of the hesitations that are coming up for me. And then finally, there's actually two more: threatening or providing an ultimatum to the relationship in an unfair way, right? So if you don't have sex with me tonight, then I'm going to break up with you. Or if you don't move across the country with me, then we're not going to be together anymore. That's not a fair ultimatum to provide to your partner in a way that manipulates the way that they think about things and makes a decision. Now, here's the thing. There are two sides to this coin, and that's where this one comes in, because you are allowed to say, I love you and I want you to be happy with where we live. And I really want to move to Wyoming. But I see that that might not be in the cards for you. So I want to take this next month to have you sit with it and decide what you want to do. And for me, I'm also going to do that. And I'm going to decide if you don't want to move to Wyoming, if I'm willing to leave the relationship to move there because it's just something that I've always dreamed of, or if I'm fine staying in North Carolina because I want to be in the relationship and the relationship is more important to me than where I actually live. So there's two different ways to do that right there. If your partner says to you, I'm moving to Wyoming and we're breaking up if you don't want to move to Wyoming. It's not necessarily fair to say that, but it's not the best way to present something that you want, and it comes off in a more controlling way. To be able to resonate with, understand, empathize with your partner when you're trying to deal with and work through some of these really hard decisions, the approach really determines if it's more of a controlling measure or it's something that's really authentic and you're trying to out the details. And then now we're at the last, criticizing your partner in order to get you to be a certain way, diminishing your self-worth over time, or making you feel that you're incompetent. So any of these right here are just a complete no-go. There's no reason. There's no way to spin them. It's actually not what the job of a partner is in my eyes and many other people's eyes. When you're in a long-term relationship and or a marriage, you are supposed to be supporting your partner to be the best version of themselves. Criticizing people is not the way to get to that place. And so if you're using those tactics, it's coming from more of a space of fear that you're in, right? In that moment, I feel like I don't have any other way to go about this than to come at it harshly and put up walls so that I can keep my partner enclosed in this space and not have to deal with what's coming up for me. That is a really, really important thing to take into consideration to kind of transition to what do I do if my partner's controlling. The first piece of this, understand them and have maybe some empathy for them, but definitely have some understanding around why would they want to control me in the first place? What might be going on for them? And this is going to call on you to really get to know your partner on a deeper level. Now, for partners who really aren't in a place where they could be in a healthy relationship at all, you will start to realize very quickly that when you try to move into a place of understanding, that they will use that against you over time. So let's say, for example, I sat down with my husband and was trying to understand why he, I don't know, I'm gonna have to make something up, doesn't want me to go out with a friend. More likely, it's the opposite. He's trying to understand why I don't want him to go out with a friend. Well, I'm going to start expressing my emotions. I might say, today in this space that we don't have a lot of time together. You come home from work very late, very often, and I feel like we're disconnected, and I feel like you're choosing somebody else over me. This tactic can be, if it was a tactic, it could be utilized in another relationship to really rope your partner in and get them under your wing so that you can control them. It is a strategy used to manipulate people into feeling guilty about themselves. But if I'm truly sitting down with my partner in my relationship, which is a healthy one, fairly healthy, I would categorize it, is that when I share my emotion, the end result is going to be that my husband and I figure out another time that we can get together and have some meaningful connection. What it doesn't mean is that I'm going to prevent him from going out with his friend, because for me, who's a fairly healthy person, I would feel very guilty if he didn't go out with his friend after he and I had the conversation. So see how that's different. A partner who's manipulating and has no desire to move into a healthier space and time in your relationship is not necessarily going to feel guilty for making you stay in, and they're not necessarily ever going to share the guilt if they have it, because they're avoiding the feelings that are uncomfortable. All right. So to understand your partner is going to be extremely important here, because this will help them actually let go of some of what they're trying to control if they can understand that you get them and you get the fears that they have that are coming up for them. The other piece that I want to insert here is boundaries that you might have for yourself. And sometimes those are physical boundaries of like, I'm going out with my friends right now. I'm not moving to Wyoming because I don't want to move to Wyoming. And I am willing to risk the relationship if that's something that you need to do. I need the login and password to our bank account because I also need access to my money and to be able to manage our finances. If you can't provide me with that access, I will have to get a lawyer in order to get access to our bank account. It could also look like, I'm kind of going back to my list here. No, you may not go through my phone. I have been honest with you. I'm happy to find a time to sit down and talk more about this, but you may not unannounced take my phone every day and go through it for 20 minutes and open up all of my apps and all of my text messages. If you do not trust me, I want to talk about the reasons why we've come to a point where you can't trust me. And I want to discuss how we can move into a place of trust without having to get access to each other's phones every other day and go through them for 20 minutes at a time. We are in connection frequently. We are sharing romance together and passion and intimacy and friendship, and also being partners in crime and running a household together. If you just meet that person with like, absolutely not, that doesn't work for me, it's going to influence the trust that they have in the relationship. And so there's a way to sit down and say, hey, I think there's something going on for you. I love you. I'm here with you. I want to talk more about this because I'm concerned that you want to go into my phone. Or I'm concerned that you just put up this wall that was like, I'm moving to Wyoming and I don't give a shit what you're doing. I'm concerned about that. It feels really bad to me. It feels like you don't care about me, or that I'm making up a story, that you don't really want to be with me. So you want to kind of consider what's surrounding that when you're setting the boundary, without just blatantly like, here it is, take it and just deal with it, because that can be hard. And then lastly, I want to kind of close this out by sharing that you are not trapped in any relationship. And I also want to provide you the messaging, because after having been in a controlling relationship, a couple actually, it's important to know that you will be okay. This is not the only person on the planet for you. This may not be your person. And if you've tried to connect with them and hold boundaries with them and it hasn't worked, you may need to separate yourself. You shouldn't be doing these things for years on end, setting the boundaries and having the conversations. It does take time to work through whatever issues are coming up. And I do very much recommend individual therapy and couples therapy. You might want to try one first, so each of you goes to individual therapy. I also recommend going to couples therapy if you're in a controlling relationship first, because if your controlling partner goes to individual therapy and starts to make up lies about you, feeds them to their therapist, and then the therapist comes back and says, well, you know, this is controlling XYZ, or this is abusive XYZ, it can kind of confuse the situation and muddy the waters. And then and a therapist shouldn't do that. So you want to make sure that you're working with someone who understands that any information you're feeding them is one-sided, so that your partner may not be exactly the way that they're portraying them. So it's important to find a good practitioner that you jive with. But if you go to individual work, psychotherapy, coaching, counseling, if you go see a psychologist, I don't care who it is, but you want to make sure that if you're in a controlling dynamic in your relationship, that your partner isn't utilizing their practitioner in order to like weaponizing that information against you and saying, well, my therapist said this. That just makes it more of a sticky situation. So in a controlling relationship, a heavy suggestion that I often have is to go do couples work at first. That being said, you need to be strong in yourself, because if you're with someone and you go into couples work and that partner is able to manipulate the practitioner, which a good practitioner should not be manipulated. There are signs and symptoms of this. But if you go into couples work and the partner manipulates the practitioner, you can get yourself into a bit of trouble there, or it just may be wasted time. So anyways, more on that at another time. I also want to just make you aware and point out of my new series called Reddit Got It Good. And it is where I will be featuring Reddit stories on Saturdays, a casual conversation after yoga, just a little chit chat, us together around what's going on in people's lives and their relationships. I have encouraged my TikTok followers to send me messages, write something in the comments that you want me to talk about, email me, reach out through my website, leave me a review, reach out through Reddit if you want to find my Reddit account and comment right under there as well. There are multiple ways to get in touch with me. Please do though. Share your stories, share your questions. I will devote an entire episode to a really great story. And then I also ask that on my Reddit Got It Good Saturdays, I am going to give away my card deck. It's not on my desk right now. My couples card deck called Relate Connect, and it's a card game for couples to play. I'm going to give that away to someone who writes me a review completely free. I'm going to mail it to you. I'm going to pay for the shipping. So get your free card deck, right? Why would you pass that up? All you have to do is take a minute or 2 minutes to just click the link to leave me a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, where I'm going to bring you, I'm hoping Tuesday and Saturday episodes, so that you can kind of depend on those days to be my release days. And we'll just see how crazy life gets, but that's sort of my goal right now. And as always, thank you for being here. I also have my Uberlube code, which always stands. It's www.uberlube.com/committedpod, and committed has 2 T's and 2 M's in it. That's my affiliate link for Uberlube, so you can get a discount. I love Uberlube. I've been using it for over 10 years. If you've listened to my other episodes, I've talked about it more in depth. So go back and listen to those if you'd like. And as always, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for tuning into the podcast. If you're new to our community, welcome. We really want our podcast to grow. So please like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star review with your feedback on how we can make your experience most catered to you. As I work with my private clients continuously, this podcast is a great way for me to help more of you. Please reach out if you have any ideas